You know, there's times where a game is bad, but you can tell they put effort into it. Like Sonic 06. It was bad, but you can at least tell they tried. They failed miserably, but they tried. And with this game, they didn't.
The 17th of this month marks my 4-year anniversary here on my little plot of YouTube. I had a few things planned for what I might do. I was thinking about talking about myself, letting you know more about me than just the little tidbits I give out during reviews. Or I was thinking of doing a video about why Sonic doesn't actually suck but gets a bad reputation. But I've done enough talking with the videos I posted last month, of which I put all of them together into one massive video with extra content at the end that I'll upload at some point in the future. But I decided to review a game that some people have brought up and has been forgotten, and its developer Data Design Interactive is a story of a fallen developer or a Wikipedia article full of lies. And I'm leaning towards the latter there, as even Wikipedia has stated that it's disputing the neutrality of the article, because it presents Data Design Interactive as a really good developer. And one person said in the talk page of the article that the founder, Stuart Green, vandalized the page to make the developer not seem like a shovelware factory. If you were to read the article, you would see that there's an overuse of the word innovation, and that they had an amazing comeback in 2008 when they gained 40% of the Wii market share with retail sales worth 30 million euros, which is about 32 million US dollars. Keep in mind that's split between 62 titles, resulting in each title making about $516,000 if split evenly, and each of their games sold about 50,000 copies each, meaning that if they made 32 million, each game would have to roughly sell for $10.
Of course, we know that didn't happen because they sold these games for $20 each. So they probably spent $32 million to make all those games, and they probably could have put them all on one disc and called it Action 62.
DDI created a game engine called GODS, standing for Game Oriented Development System, which from the way it was described was designed to work from the top down, creating higher levels of code which was machine dependent so older code could work on newer formats. And by reusing the coding they were able to achieve a very short production time, which explains 30 titles released in 2007 and 62 released in 2008 with a staff of 40 people. Already you can see the problem here. Quantity over quality much? They even had the arrogance, the audacity to say that their method of developing games like that makes them, and I'm quoting them here, the biggest and most reliable Wii developer in the world. They were really stretching the definition of the words biggest and reliable. Nintendo is bigger than they are, much bigger, by several hundred employees, and more reliable as they put out high quality games. But if DDI wants to say that they're the biggest and most reliable by farting out as much garbage as they possibly could in the shortest amount of time, then sure, they did have the biggest amount of releases and were reliable enough for all those releases to be the lowest common denominator of video games for the years of 2007 and 8 consecutively.
Playing this game makes me look back on Ride to Hell Retribution. They tried to make it good. There was honest to God effort in that one. With Anubis II, they pretty much admitted that they put no work into it whatsoever when they explained their design process.
And the reason why these games were made so quickly is because they're all ports of their PS2 titles that were only released in Europe. And all the problems from those versions carried over to this one and were probably made worse during the porting process, as all DDI did was tweak their game engine for the appropriate game system. It's obvious that this is a port of a PS2 game because of the 4:3 aspect ratio instead of 16:9. However, I would like to point out that the PS2 was capable of widescreen as is the Wii. This might be remnants of code from when the engine was used to make games for the PlayStation 1 and they just didn't bother to change it. The graphics are below par for your cartoony platformer. The face of Anubis is painted on the geometry rather than having a modeled face. The polygon count is between a PS1 and PS2 game. Everything looks the same. It's all the same textures on all the geometry. The enemies are either bugs or rock monsters and they look all the same. There's no difference between the way a level looks or how the enemies look, except for one level when you're inside a pyramid. The music for the levels is different between each one, but you'll never notice as it's the same 20-second loop with the same instruments and the same musical style. It's just really annoying, boring, and generic music that's not even trying.
And that's a phrase that describes this game perfectly. Not even trying. Everything about this game is not even trying. They just try to get so many low-budget games out there so this way they could at least attempt to make a profit.
When I first started playing the game, Anubis felt okay when controlling him. He ran pretty fast and responded quite well to the analog stick, so at first I was wondering what people were complaining about. But it wasn't until the jumping and combat tutorials is when I realized I was going to be in for a terrible ride. To jump, the game tells you to flick the nunchuck upwards, which you can do if you want to have a really bad time, but you can just press the Z button to jump and double jump instead. You may see Anubis jumping sporadically throughout the review. That's me either adjusting my glasses or moving around in my seat. To use the melee attack, you have to swing the Wiimote, which works about 66% of the time. The other 34% of the time, it's not going to respond at all. That's why you'll see me barely using it, as pressing the B button will activate a reticule that allow you to fire your staff. This is the most efficient way of picking off your enemies, staying at a distance and shooting them, especially because once you move the reticule onto an enemy, it locks on and stays with it, unless you make a sudden movement with a controller. The more enemies you kill this way, the more you power up this ability. Soon you'll be able to take down all the enemies with either 1 or 2 shots with no problem, making the game a cakewalk. But then there's throwing bombs. You have to press and hold A and swing the controller up, and it only works when it wants to, which is almost never, and the accuracy is terrible. Which sucks because throwing bombs is the only way you can defeat this game's one and only boss at the last stage. The bombs also have a strange distance, mostly being thrown way too far or not close enough to your target.
So beating the final boss is more luck-based than skill, because no matter how much I jerked off my Wii, nothing would happen. That sounded a lot better in my head.
This game is so small. There's only 4 levels in addition to a boss stage and the tutorial level for a total of technically 4. Then there's 4 bonus stages which are almost meaningless to count them. After the tutorial, you have to go through the 4 main levels, and you know what you do in them? Follow the arrow that leads you from pyramid orb to pyramid orb. Collect 8 orbs in the very linear stages and then reach the goal. Do this 4 times and you get to go to the boss stage, and that's it. The bonus stages don't reward you with anything at all except for points, which don't matter because your score resets each time you enter a new level. You know what also resets? Your life counter. You enter a stage with 3 lives regardless if you had 4 or more or less in the previous level. You start each level with 5 hit points, and you can gain more from defeated enemies by collecting the heart that flies out of them before it floats away. Once you get the max of 10 hearts, if you collect an 11th, you lose 5 hearts but gain an extra life. An interesting but extremely stupid mechanic. I guess it makes sense to lose 5 hit points in exchange for an extra life since you get hearts so easily. There's really no need for extra lives. The game is far too easy. An extra life is just pointless. Even more useless than the point system. But instead of taking the hit points away, just have the extra hearts become points. It probably would have been less programming.
I actually had to stop and think which game was worse, Bubsy 3D or this. On one hand, Bubsy 3D was made by a group of people that had absolutely no idea what they were doing, but Anubis II, they just didn't care.
With Bubsy 3D, they thought the game would be a hit with early 3D platform adopters, even though they had no idea what they were doing with 3D programming tools, and after seeing Super Mario 64, they wanted more time to work on the game but weren't given that time. With Anubis II, yeah, this isn't a sequel. They knew what they were doing, and they were being lazy and just half-assing everything, to the point where people have said that Ninja Bread Man, another DDI game, is a carbon copy of Anubis II as it had the same music and level design. I cannot verify that, but that's what I've heard. And the laziness is probably worse because it shows a lack of care. But from a technical standpoint, Anubis II is functional, more so than Bubsy 3D. I was able to play Anubis with no real issue. I didn't use the melee attack because it wasn't responsive, and neither was the bomb attack, so I didn't use it. I just stayed at a distance and picked off the enemies by shooting them. The reticule gave me an issue once in a while as it would freeze on screen and needed some wiggling to fix it. The camera is terrible, often flipping out when it gets too close to Anubis, but is easily reset with the D-pad. The biggest crime this game commits is just being a really boring and lazily made game with barely functioning motion controls, and thrown on shelves at a budget price, unlike Bubsy 3D, which slapped a bunch of fraudulent praise on the cover and sold it at full price. It still doesn't excuse DDI for flooding the Wii library with inferior titles, but these games are mostly known for their negative reception and are easily forgotten about.
The only redeeming factor that this game has is that it tells you exactly where to go every step of the way, resulting in a very short runtime. I played the game for 2 hours, which is an hour and 58 minutes more than anyone should.
Is Anubis II the worst game ever? Well, if you play it like a jackass and only use the melee attacks and flick the nunchuck up to jump, then yeah, it'll be one of the worst experiences of your life. But if you use the Z button to jump and shoot your enemies from a distance, you'll have a barely tolerable experience. To me, this is more like Superman 64, a game that's badly made but is more boring than anything. The game does nothing, and I mean nothing, to entertain you at all. There's no cutscenes or anything to explain the story, something you could get away with in the cartridge in early PlayStation 1 days, but not now. Not even for an indie budget title, as indie titles, even in 2007, still put more effort into their games for the same if not lower price. If this was an early PlayStation 1 game, it would have been passable, but just hardly keeping its butt out of the fire of failure. Even for a PS2 game, it's a failure, and for a Wii title, it's an even bigger failure. I paid $1 for this game, and I feel like I should have been paid to take it. Bad games like this should just be given away when they turn up used at a game store, otherwise they'll just be thrown in the trash where they belong. Games that are this bad should be denied entry into places like GameStop. They don't want to buy that crap to sell it, only to get it back when people trade it in.
That's why I'm going to break the cycle. This piece of shit is going in the trash where it belongs, so that way no one ever has to deal with that copy again.